the candle flickers and the figure strides into the cold hall on a January night, and it is none other than Mark Passio to share his knowledge this evening of the writings of Aleister Crowley and Thelema. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mark Passio.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Bob, strap yourself in. It's going to be a great ride here tonight on Occult Empire. So let's get started. I want to first say that what I'm going to talk about here today is and should be considered by anyone who is listening as introductory material. When you're approaching a field of endeavor as large as the works and writings of an occultist such as Aleister Crowley, we could not possibly cover all of it in 20 radio shows of this length, 50 even. This is intended to simply whet the appetite and to give people some background material so that it will spark them to go and do their own research and take a look at Crowley's writings for themselves and contemplate them and really take them into themselves and analyze them and pull some spiritual wisdom and truth out of them and put that to practice in their own lives. This should not be considered by any stretch of the imagination the total word on the topic, and people have to keep that in mind and say, well, Mark didn't touch on this aspect tonight, and that means that this is incomplete or somehow not accurate. This is again intended as an introduction, and I'm letting people know in advance I am not the definitive expert on Crowley or Thelema. It is an interest of mine. I have read a lot of his writings, and I think I have a firm grasp on the very deep underlying principles of the Thelemic philosophy. However, I'm not telling you I'm the be-all, end-all expert in this field, in this entire area of inquiry. So please keep that in mind. The second thing I'd like to offer as a caveat to individuals and to have them keep in mind as we progress through the show is that because I am talking about someone's material and happening to agree with a good portion of it, does not mean I agree with all of the things that Crowley put forward, wrote, or most certainly did. We have to keep a clear distinction in mind between Crowley as a sort of a channel for spiritual information and Aleister Crowley, the man, as he lived his life in the physical world. And again, a distinction needs to be made between those two entities, if you will. Crowley put out a lot of high-minded spiritual information through his writings for those who have the eyes to see and ears to hear, as the saying goes. But again, certain aspects of the way the man lived his life, most certainly I would not condone. So it's important to keep in mind, yes, this is an instance, as Bob and I talked about briefly earlier, of a do as I say, not as I do type situation. And just because I am talking about the philosophy that one man put forward, again, does not mean that I condone every aspect of this individual's life and what actions he may have or may not have taken while he lived. The two things need to be kept very distinct. And if you can't hold in your mind and consider something that someone said and put forward for consideration, and you can't separate that from the way that the person actually lived themselves, well, I think you're missing out on some very important material, and you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as the saying goes. And I caution people against doing that. I always try to stress an integral approach to any spiritual information so that you take what resonates and leave the rest, and certainly don't set someone else's way that they live their life in ways that they failed in their spiritual uplift, failed to stay on the path in many cases. Don't let that influence you from simply looking at what they wrote and deciding on whether it has merit to it, or deciding whether there is veracity, there is truthfulness within it. Okay, so that's a very important thing to keep in mind And I think it's a hallmark of maturity when it comes to the intake of information, especially occulted information. So with that having been said, let's jump in to the material. And I want to let everyone know that I have posted a mini slideshow. Okay, I put together a little slideshow for the concepts and ideas that I'll be talking about here tonight on the show. These images reside at whatonearthishappening.com. That's my website, whatonearthishappening.com. And you want to click the first item in the news section right now. And this will apply only for today, January 17th, 2013. If you're listening to the podcast after this, these images will be in the news section, farther down in the news section. Okay, so it's January 17th, 2013 today, and on the most recent news items right now on What on Earth is Happening in the news section, the top item is my appearance here on Occult Empire. Underneath the image for the show that acts as the link to get to the Blog Talk page where you can listen to the show at, there will be several links. They're numerical links. It says images for the show. You can click on any of those numerical links, and it will open up a slideshow. And in there are the slides that I'm going to be going over today, and a lot of the concepts and ideas that we'll be talking about are contained on those slides. That will also be kept, those images will also be kept along with the podcast when it is archived on the website. Okay, so slide number 1 simply shows an image of Aleister Crowley, kind of during his prime to somewhat later years. And the phrase at the top, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," the phrase perhaps which he is best known for. At the bottom, "Love is the law, love under will," which needs to be always kept in conjunction with the top portion, okay, that we'll talk about later what is meant by "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and the concept of the true will, which Crowley espoused in his Thelemic philosophy. We have some of the symbols that are associated with Crowley. We have the sigil of the AA, Crowley's occult order or society, his fraternal order, the Brotherhood of the Silver Star, the Argenteum Astrum, as it was called. That's what AA stands for. We have the unicursal hexagram of Thelema. It is the chalice and the blade united, but not interlocked, but continuously flowing into each other. Unicursal means that it's one writing. So you can make this form of the six-pointed star, or the union of the chalice and the blade symbols, the sacred masculine and sacred feminine, with one pen stroke without lifting the pen from the paper. Okay. In the lower left-hand corner, we have the Magus card of Crowley's Thoth deck. Okay, the tarot deck that he actually created along with Lady Freda Harris. And on the bottom right, we have the Rose Cross symbol of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, of which Crowley was an active member during his lifetime. The dates of his birth and death are there, and basically this is simply the introductory slide. What I would like to do is really go through kind of a synopsis of a timeline of Crowley's life, and as we approach significant ideas, break them down as we move forward. So Aleister Crowley, he was, of course, a occultist, a mystic, practitioner of ceremonial magic, a poet, an author of many books and writings. And he was born as Edward Alexander Crowley. That was his actual birth name, Edward Alexander Crowley, on October 12th, 1975, in the town of Royal Leamington Spa. This is a town in Warwickshire, England, in the central portion of England. And
that, Mark?
Yes.
That would be 1875.
I'm sorry, I said 1975. I correct.
That's okay.
Thank you for the correction. 1875. Pardon me. A slip of the tongue is not a slip of the mind. I actually did I do have it here as 1875. I apologize for that. Actually, I do not. It says 1975 on the slide, so I do have that incorrect. I will correct that. Thanks for the correction there, Bob.
No worries, my friend. No
1875 in Royal Leamington Spa, a town in Warwickshire, England. That's in central England. Crowley grew up in a Christian family, kind of a fundamentalist Christian upbringing. His father, named Edward Crowley, retired early after a successful career in a family-owned brewing business. And some people will say, well, this is kind of ironic because it's like, a fundamentalist Christian-type background doesn't really go hand-in-hand with brewing. But he was a brewer, yes. Or he owned shares in a brewing company, a family-owned brewing company, and that's how he made his money. So he retired early and became a traveling preacher in line with his fundamentalist Christian beliefs. Crowley's mother, her name was Emily. Her maiden name was Bishop, Emily Bishop. And he and her never saw eye to eye. They kind of feuded in Crowley's youth. His mother gave him his nickname, the Beast. She kind of called him a Satan or a beast because he kind of rebelled against his Christian upbringing from a young age and sought to expand his mental horizons and his spiritual horizons, and kind of rejected that fundamentalist upbringing. And his mother didn't really take too kindly to that, and she nicknamed him the Beast for it, which he kind of accepted and took unto himself, and often called himself the Beast himself and called himself the Great Beast, to Megatherion, as it is translated in the Greek. So Crowley's father passed away when he was only 11 years old, and he inherited his father's wealth from his brewing business. This is how Crowley was really able to travel extensively throughout the world and, not really have to be tied down with a typical, worker salary and job. So he was fairly wealthy, at least wealthy enough to travel for many, many years. At age 20, Crowley officially changed his name to Alistair. His name was Edward Alexander, and his parents would call him Alec. And he didn't like that. He didn't like his real name, Edward, either, so he decided to change his name to something a little bit more fluid sounding, and he liked the way the syllabic distribution of Alistair Crowley sounded, and therefore that's what he chose as his name in public life. He attended Trinity College at Cambridge University, where he studied philosophy and literature. He was in and out of many schools during his youth for different reasons, often behavioral. He took vacations when he was at Cambridge University, and his favorite pastime was mountain climbing. He was a mountaineer. It was a very big aspect of his life, and he enjoyed climbing in the European Alps. So throughout his life, Crowley was always a very free-spirited sexually. He had a very free-spirited sexuality, to say the least. And he engaged in relations with both men and women, so he was bisexual. Some people call him trisexual. He would try anything, as the saying goes. But definitely free-spirited in sexuality and incorporated sexuality at a very high level into his magical practices and his occult belief systems. Crowley had a sudden brush with illness in 1897, which led him to contemplate his own morality very deeply. He really pondered on death and came to the conclusion that he wouldn't waste his time with very worldly pursuits, but instead he would devote his life to pursuit of esoteric and occult studies and devote his energy toward spiritual attainment. He met the alchemist, the practicing alchemist, Julian Baker, while vacationing in Switzerland one year. And Baker introduced Crowley to a lifelong friend, George Cecil Jones, a lifelong friend of Crowley's. Jones was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, one of the most famous occult societies in the world, certainly of the Western world and certainly of Europe at that time. And Jones kind of brought Crowley into the fold of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And Crowley was eventually initiated into this order in 1898 on November 18th. There, while in the order and having a lot of different relationships with different occultists in that order, he advanced his studies of many different occult traditions, namely Kabbalah, Hermeticism, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, alchemy, tarot, and ceremonial magic, which were his main endeavors of study, of occult study. In the year 1900, he visited the United States and Mexico, where he scaled several mountains. He then traveled to India in 1902 and set out on an expedition to make an attempt to scale K2, which is the second highest mountain on Earth next to Mount Everest. This expedition ultimately proved unsuccessful after Crowley was struck with flu, malaria, and snow blindness during the scaling attempt. So the expedition was forced to turn back. Many other individuals on that expedition got different illnesses as well, and it was ultimately proved to be unsuccessful. In 1903, he married his first wife, Rose Kelly, who was the sister of his friend Gerald Kelly. So Rose became his first wife. The following year, 1904, they traveled to Egypt. The same year, I should say. In 1903, they traveled to Egypt. While they were in Cairo, this is one of the biggest moments of Crowley's life when he penned what would arguably be said to be his most important piece of writing. They were staying in Egypt, in Cairo. And on April 8th, Crowley started hearing a voice, a disembodied voice. And, some people will say, okay, well, this is, signs of schizophrenia or, drug hallucination. But Crowley didn't see it as such. He felt that this voice, while not his own, had a lot of very profound information and was giving him detailed spiritual knowledge that he felt that it was important to write down. So this disembodied voice he later named Aiwass, Aiwass in English, and he came to call it his holy guardian angel. He looked at it as this channel to the higher self, this calling or this voice that was not his own ego thought, in the mind, the typical daily day-to-day chatter that we all hear. He saw this as some form of a connection to higher self, and when it was speaking to him, he would do what he called automatic writing. He would simply let his own thoughts go to the wayside and simply write down everything the voice was saying in his mind. So Crowley wrote down everything this voice told him while he was in Cairo on April 8th, and then over the next couple of days. So for 3 full days, he channeled and penned these writings. And this information came to be called the Book of the Law, Liber al vel Legis in Latin, or simply the Book of the Law in English is what Crowley came to call it. These channeled writings ultimately spoke of a new aeon, a new age for mankind, that mankind was coming out of an age of spiritual darkness and would emerge into spiritual light that was representative of the birthing of a new aeon or a new age. This voice called the age the Aeon of Horus. Horus is an Egyptian entity, it's an Egyptian god. There was a sun god, and Horus represented the rising of the sun as it would come up in the east in the morning to rejuvenate the world. It would bathe the world in light, and it would, it was man's best friend because man didn't want to exist in darkness. Darkness was seen as the enemy in the ancient world. Where there is darkness, there is predation by animals. Crops during the winter months when the sun is low do not grow as well. You have to survive through the winter months. Darkness is considered associated with death. It is associated with spiritual death as well, with not understanding higher law, with not understanding spiritual law. Light is the opposite. It is associated with life. It is associated with renewal and rebirth and resurrection and growth and spiritual enlightenment, spiritual knowledge being held by the recipient. So this is what the Aeon of Horus represented, this dawning of light, of a new age that would represent mankind coming to know the truth about the veil being lifted on the matters of the occult, the veil being lifted on matters of the loss of freedom and the fall into ego and base consciousness and dualistic consciousness. And the Aeon of Horus was the reversal of that. It was the veil being lifted, the apocalypse, again, coming from the Greek language, apo, meaning to take away or to remove, and kalyptine, meaning veil or to conceal. You know, kalyptine is a verb that means to conceal, to hide, to veil from sight, okay, to hide, in other words, to keep secret. And apocalyptine means the opposite of that. It means to take out of secrecy, to reveal. And that's what this concept of the Aeon of Horus was about in the Book of the Law. It also spoke about the fact that Crowley would be one of the prophets of this dawning age, that he would express some of the ideas that were so prevalent and so important to this new Aeon, the Aeon of Horus, coming to fruition. And he saw himself as such, as this prophet for this channeled information. One of the big maxims in the Book of the Law is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And this is the basis for the idea that Crowley termed Thelema, which in Greek means will. And we have to make a distinction between the true will and the lowercase w will. I make the distinguishment by calling the true will the uppercase W will, okay, the capital W will. Will with a capital W, or simply the true will, distinguishing it from the ego-driven will of any individual. You know, it's not what I want. That's the ego will, okay? It's the will of creation. It's what the cosmos is attempting to accomplish, the great work that creation is setting forth in doing and trying to manifest. And it's up to us to step into the slipstream of that true will and understand what it is and understand our role in it and how we may serve that work. So this was one of the biggest maxims of the book, okay, this true will, and it is spoken of simply as Thelema in Crowley's writings. The importance of living in harmony with this will is stressed in the Book of the Law as well, and how our lives will flow more freely and we will have more freedom if we step into that slipstream of the true will. And we'll go deeper into this idea. I have a lot that I want to analyze about the true will. But essentially the Book of the Law really talked about how we will prosper the more we step into the true will. And the more we try to ignore it, to put it off to the side, to not do the true will, the more humanity's going to encounter very rough times. And this is part of the thing that Crowley wanted to evangelize during his entire life, that we need to set our own egoic, selfish, lower base natures to the side and put aside what we want, you know, lowercase will, and give at least a good portion of our time, attention, energy, and effort to accomplishing the true will. So let's stop briefly here before we go back into more information on Crowley's life and just analyze the true will. So on slide number 2, the Greek word Thelema is broken down, basically. And the concept of the true will is on the slide. And it says in parentheses there, not to be confused with will lowercase w, because the distinction really clearly needs to be made in one's mind who is studying this material, and that needs to be understood so that we can make accurate definitions, okay? So the word Thelema is written there in Greek. Theta, epsilon, lambda, eta, mu, alpha. The word Thelema in Greek means will. And if we do what is called gematria, which is occultic numerology, it is the simple adding together of numerical representations for letters. So in Greek, letters are assigned specific numbers in the Greek alphabet. And if we take the numbers that is ascribed to each letter and we simply add them up, so the theta character in Greek in gematria is assigned the number 9. The epsilon character is 5. Lambda is 30. Eta is 8. Mu is 40. And alpha is 1. So we take those individual values and add them together, and we get the number 93, which is a very important number in Crowley's system of Thelema and Thelemic philosophy. We'll talk about what the number 93 means in a moment, or perhaps a little bit later. But what I want to do is show the equivalency of another concept that Crowley spoke about, which is the second part of do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Okay? Now, will is capitalized. Okay? It means do the will of creation, not your own will. In other words, let thy will be done, not my will be done. That concept. Okay? And it shall be the whole of the law. The law is capitalized as well. This is spiritual law, cosmic, universal spiritual law. We're not talking about the laws of man here. And that needs to be understood as well, that uppercase L law is the laws of nature, the laws of the cosmos. It has nothing to do with man's law, okay? And it has nothing to do with the quote-unquote natural order as people think of it in terms of Darwinism often. That has absolutely zero to do with what I'm talking about when I say the laws of nature. We're talking about the non-man-made, universal and binding conditions that ultimately govern the consequences of behavior. Okay? So this is the consequences that are generated by the actions that we take. And this is governed by the higher will of creation, by the creative intelligence that underlies everything in the universe. If you want to call it the mind of God, if you want to call it God, if you want to call it the unified field, if you want to call it, the underlying intelligence inherent in nature, it's your business what you want to refer to that force as. But that's what we're talking about here when we talk about uppercase L law. It is not the whims and man-made contrivances of lowercase L law of man. Okay, two completely separate things that are antithetical to each other. So love is the law, love under will, is the second part of this maxim that comes forth in the book of the law. Love, capital W. In Greek, this is agape. Alpha, gamma, alpha, pi, eta. Agape. And I wrote it there with an accent, an acute accent over the E, so you know it is pronounced agape and not agape. Okay? So the concept of true love, love with a capital L, not to be confused, as I write on slide number 2 here, with love with a lowercase l, as in, I love the new iPhone I just got, or I love my new Lexus. Okay? That's not what we're talking about. Not even I love my wife, or my husband, or my daughter, or my son. We're talking about the actual force that is the expansive force of consciousness in the universe. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the higher case L, love. And when we align ourselves with that force, we are aligning ourselves with true will. And these concepts are equivalent, okay? Love is the law, love under will. Love under will literally means that will needs to be built upon the foundation of love. So you look at it as an actual, an equation. You're putting love underneath the will so that love acts as the foundation upon which everything else is built. In other words, the expansive force of consciousness that combats fear, combats duality, combats selfishness, This has to be the underlying universal foundation of all things upon which we can build the true will and attempt to do the great work of truth, love, and freedom. So this is what this actually means. You're building upon a foundation of consciousness, of the expansive force of consciousness, which is love. And if we do the Greek gematria breakdown, the occultic numerological breakdown of the Greek word agape, meaning love in the Greek language, we see that alpha, the character alpha in Greek equals 1, gamma equals 3, alpha is 1 again, pi is 80, and I actually have it written incorrectly on this slide as well. I will correct that as well, so I have 2 slides to correct. It should say eta and not epsilon at the end there. That's an oversight on my part, and I apologize for that. But eta actually equals 8. Okay, so when we total those up, we get 93 again. So in the concept of occult gematria, this occultic numerological system, whenever 2 words equate to the same numbers, when we're totaling their characters, they mean the same thing. They have the same underlying meaning in manifestation. So in Thelema, in the Greek word Thelema, since it totals 93, when we compare it with the Greek word agape, which means love, and that totals 93, these terms are equivalent. Will and love, Thelema meaning will and agape meaning love, are considered equivalents in this system of gematria. And this is what Crowley was explaining through the Book of the Law and other writings, that ultimately the expansive force of consciousness and connection to the higher self is what puts us in touch with the true will. And if we are in any other state of consciousness, we're not doing the true will. We are falling short of it. And ultimately, due to the higher law, capital L law that is in place, cosmic spiritual law, natural law, we are ultimately putting ourselves deeper and deeper into chains, into bondage, into slavery, as a result of the refusal to align with this higher cosmic force known as the true will. So continuing on with an analysis of the true will before we go back to Crowley's life, on slide number 3, here's more analysis of what the true will is about. It can be seen as a moment-to-moment path of action, a moment-to-moment. You're in what I call that slipstream of just simply acting in an effortless capacity. You're doing the work, okay? You're not in resistance. You're in flow. It's a moment-to-moment path of action that operates in perfect harmony with universal spiritual law. That is what Crowley's concept of the true will was about. This will manifests from the interplay between the higher self and the entire universe. So the monad, the soul, having a connection, a deep, unbreakable, bonded connection with the all. That's what this true will connection is about. This will guide those who follow it, who accept it and follow it to their grand destiny in life. In other words, their purpose will be fulfilled. They will not be searching for what they're here to do. They will simply be doing it. Those who get into touch with this true will have eliminated or bypassed false desires, the base desires, the animal desires of the flesh, and they will have bypassed or eliminated internal contradictions within themselves. So they will not be in opposition within themselves. They're beings that as they think, so they feel, and so they act. And there's no internal contradiction or opposition between those 3 modalities of consciousness, their thoughts, their emotions, and their actions. They have accessed a deep connection with the divine. The spark of the divine within themselves has been accessed and has been basically lit aflame and has grown into a large spiritual fire, if you will. When in the state of this consciousness, in this state of consciousness, one's life becomes flowing. It flows effortlessly. I shouldn't even use the word effortlessly. There's still effort required, of course. There's time and attention and effort required. But one's life flows freely would probably be a better way of putting it. There is less opposition. There is less resistance. Okay, so it flows without resistance. And it flows without lust for result, as Crowley put it. The lust of result is, I have to see the manifestation, I need to see it right now, what we would call immediate gratification. That's not present. You're just doing the work because you know it's the right thing to do. You know it's in alignment with higher moral law. It is within right. And you simply do it because it is the right thing to do. That's what is meant by the true will. Some other analyses of true will that I gleaned from some other writers on the internet, and some of this is directly borrowed from some other people's analysis. So again, I kind of took a look at what other people were saying. That first slide is kind of an amalgamation of my own interpretations or views of what the true will is, combined with some other authors, and as is this slide in slide number 4. So the main precept of Thelema, the maxim of "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," is often completely misunderstood by people who hear that and think they know what it means, and they take it out of context. They don't have an understanding of what was actually meant by that phrase, because the internal definitions that they're operating with are not the same as what Crowley was really speaking about, using the same English words but really meaning different occult concepts. And that's why I distinguish. You'll notice every time I wrote this phrase down, I put the capital W where will is at. Do what thou wilt, capital W, shall be the whole of the law, capital L. So we have to understand what Crowley really meant by it and its proper usage. It refers, of course, to the true will, which this particular writer in his analysis said he called it our true and perfect path on which our own personal holy guardian angel, this is another concept, again, Crowley talked about the voice, the disembodied voice that helped him to write some of his spiritual works as his holy guardian angel, this connection to the higher self. The true will is our true and perfect path on which our holy guardian angel guides us when we have learned to hear and follow the higher self. Okay, so this holy guardian angel concept is this connection to the higher self, and we need to learn to listen to it, to silence the voice of the ego and listen to what this higher self, the message it has for us, directing us spiritually in life. For those called to this path, the true will refers to the great work. And as I have talked about on my shows in the past, the great work is truth, love, freedom, in that order. A dedication to the truth and putting the truth out there for others, taking it into oneself without resistance, learning it, and then putting it out there for other people. Love, the expansive force of consciousness being the guiding aspect, the guiding force in our lives, and freedom, espousing true freedom, understanding what true freedom is in conjunction with higher moral law, with universal cosmic spiritual law, and living in that capacity. No contradiction. Okay? So the non-aggression principle combined with the self-defense principle, the sacred feminine combined with the sacred masculine. And not controlling others and not being controlled. All right? Knowing your rights, knowing what you own, not taking what does not belong to you in the forms of life, liberty, and property. This is the great work. Do what thou wilt does not mean do whatever you want. This is the most misunderstood aspect of all Thelemic philosophy. Let me repeat that again, because it's very important. Do what thou wilt, capital W, does not mean do whatever you want. For those who think it means that, you're horribly mistaken and simply wrong. That is not what Crowley meant by that. He wrote about this extensively extensively, is non-ambiguous in Thelemic philosophy. Okay? So, do what thou wilt, capital W, does not mean do whatever you want. It is the apotheosis of freedom is what do what thou wilt means. It means you're making this as important as the divine. All right? You're elevating it to divinity. It is something that is about spiritual uplift. It is about cosmic awakening. That's what do what thou wilt is all about. But it is also the strictest possible bond. While it leads to true freedom, it means that you are bonded to doing this work in the physical domain in your lifetime. You either accept this work or you reject it. So, some people will say, well, then you're not really free. I would beg to differ. I would say you're only truly free if you're actually doing the will, the true will. That's the only thing that would make us truly free. Getting out of the ego and understanding there's a higher will at work, and this life is not about me. I'm here to learn and understand what the true will is about and then to do that work. That's what it's all about. That is the pathway to freedom. So as Crowley said, do the will, and no other shall say nay. And that's what he meant by that. The universe will open up paths for you if you are actively in tune with this higher will, with this true will. Let nothing deflect you from that austere and holy task of the great work. True freedom is absolutely to do thy will, capital W. It is not about your own egoic, selfish will or desires. It is about espousing truth, love, and freedom. Seek to do anything else whatsoever, and instantly obstacles will arise. You are not in the slipstream of creation. You will know by how much opposition you have in your life, whether you're in slipstream with the true will. People having a lot of issues, problems, difficulties. At some aspect, they're not doing the true will. They're out of harmony with it in some aspect of their lives. So every act that is not in harmony with the true will is an erratic act, and it acts as a hindrance in one's life. And that's what needs to be understood regarding the concept of the true will. And again, this concept is spoken about extensively in the Book of the Law and in a lot of Crowley's later analysis of that writing. I want to see if I can take a look at a couple other things from the Book of the Law before we continue on with Crowley's life. Crowley said in the Book of the Law that every man and woman is a star. This is another one of his famous sayings. And what he meant by this is that the star, okay, that is our star, is called soul, S-O-L, the sun, okay? So every man and woman is a star. Every man and woman is a soul. This connects with, and Crowley very often infused Egyptian motifs and the pantheon of Egyptian gods into his writings and work. So in the Egyptian or Kemetian tradition, it was said that if one lived a life in harmony with the will, many look at this as higher law, higher spiritual law in the Kemetian tradition as directed by the goddess Ma'at, M-A-A-T, who represented truth and wisdom and universal law, and incidentally was considered the highest of all gods in the Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses. Crowley was basically drawing on that Egyptian or Kemetian tradition, and they had this idea that in the afterlife, if you had lived a good life, if you did not break universal law, if you did not steal in the way of life, liberty, and property from your fellow men and women, and you could attest to that honestly in the afterlife domain, that your soul would go on to be reborn as light, as pure light in the form of a star in perhaps another area of the cosmos. And you would nurture another solar system and all the spiritual beings that, would then be nourished and supported by your radiant light, since you understood the will of creation, which was ultimately true freedom. And Crowley is infusing that here. He's saying every man and woman is ultimately a star, that we are ultimately a spiritual being having a human experience, and that it is our destiny at some future point to be reborn in this form in light, that we are a being of light. I think it's very powerful, and it's very transformative to look at this aspect of his writing in this way and understand that it was all about, again, uplifting consciousness so that we could truly get in touch with our purpose and ignite the spark of the divine within us all to be rays of brilliance so that other people can help themselves also on their spiritual journey. And that's what he meant when he said every man and woman is a star. A couple of other quotes that I find pertinent in the Book of the Law is that the goddess Nut is a representation of this creator goddess like Ma'at. She represents the void, the nothingness, the realm of pure potentiality from which all is ultimately born into manifestation. So she is the cosmic mother, or the cosmic womb of creation. And her words say, follow the ordeals of my knowledge. So, in Book of the Law, they're saying, or Crowley or the channel he's writing through is saying, acquiring this knowledge is an ordeal. It's not just going to be easily handed to you. I mean, today we have it as easy as we're going to get it with the internet. We have a communications medium available to us like we had never before in humanity. And the ancients would envy us. Information, knowledge that they died to, were tortured hideously in many cases to preserve. We have at our disposal and our fingertips, and most people are doing completely trivial matters with their lives and not even paying attention or wanting that information. So we really should take advantage of this to its fullest while we have this at our disposal. And, but the goddess here is saying that follow the ordeals of my knowledge because, it's not pretty. Learning the truth is not pretty. It's not fun. It'll make you mad. It'll make you see all the dirt that has accumulated in the soul of humanity. Enlightenment is about throwing light on the darkness, on the negative. It's about seeing the negative. It's not about being super happy. This is false spiritual enlightenment teaching. Okay? That's not what it's about. It's not about living as happily as you can live every moment of every day, which is what a lot of New Age junk floating around today is about. Enlightenment is about learning the truth, no matter how ugly the truth may be. It's about accepting truth, going into the arms of that goddess, the truth, and not being in conflict with it. Putting your ego to the side, looking at things as they really are, and saying, yes, this is how it is. Now what are we going to do about it to make it better? Instead of existing in denial. So she goes on to say, follow the ordeals of my knowledge. Seek me only, meaning the truth. Seek only the truth. Then the joys of my love will redeem you from all pain. So these are words, that express the sacred feminine, the goddess concept, the truth. Very, very powerful if they're understood properly. In another verse, he says the word of sin is restriction. Again, the restrictive aspect of consciousness. You could look at this as fear. He says, O man, refuse not thy wife if she will. O lover, if thou wilt, depart. There is no bond that can unite the divided but love. Again, the one who exists in internal opposition, the divided, is what he's talking about here. No bond can unite the divided but love, higher consciousness. That's what can bring your thoughts, emotions, and actions into unison with each other, into non-duality and non-contradiction. He says all else is a curse. This sacred union, this bond, this coming together of these three modalities of consciousness is the only thing that is truly worth doing. Everything else is a curse because it will create more duality and opposition within the self. So he says, accursed be everything else to the aeons, to hell. talking about doing the true will and what it means to do that. Get out of sin, get out of internal contradiction, get out of restriction, the restrictive aspect of consciousness that is holding us back. Get out of that which holds one back, that binds us in this mind control that exists on this planet. And those who propagate it, the dark ones who propagate this and are keeping true freedom back from humanity and keeping our birthright back from us. One more quote from the Book of the Law before we move on. Newt is heard to say in the book, "Invoke me under my stars." She's considered the cloak of the night sky and the galaxy. "Love is the law, love under will. Nor let the fools mistake love, for there are love and love." And she means the difference between love, lowercase l, your likes, your preferences, your whims, your desires, and higher case L, uppercase L, which is the expansive force of consciousness inherent in creation that we need to step into and exist in harmony with. So getting out of that fear-based mindset, willingness to desire truth and to look at it and go wherever it leads. So she also says, there is the dove and there is the serpent. Choose ye well. Meaning, you have the path, the higher path that you can take, the dove. Okay? It is considered the path of peace. It is the path of harmony with natural law. It is considered the path of true care and compassion. And we can take that path. We still can take it. It's about a shift in consciousness and understanding of oneness. And then there's the path of the serpent, which wriggles slowly in the dirt and moves very slowly. And that's the path humanity is ultimately choosing. We're not choosing well between these two paths offered. We're choosing poorly because most of us refuse truth. Most of us refuse to look at the higher aspects of selves. We're caught in ego identification. We're wrapped up in the roles we play in life, and we won't give up our attachments, even though they're wrong, even though they lead to suffering, even though they're not moral. They're doing things that are harmful to others. We do things and support things that are harmful to others. We don't understand right from wrong. And she's saying that's the path of the serpent. And it would be a wise choice not to take that path, but we'll be allowed to take it if that's what we choose. So she's saying choose well. And I would suggest humanity is not choosing so well. So one more thing about the true will before we move on. Crowley's various commentaries, his own commentaries on his own book, constantly explain that each individual has a unique aspect of, is playing a unique aspect within the true will of creation. And when they get into harmony with this will, it is ultimately going to determine the proper course in their life, and it's going to put them where they need to be in the world and enable them to do the things that they need to do. Again, do the will and no other shall say nay. The universe will open doors for you if you step into the slipstream of the true will. Crowley attempted in many of his commentaries to explain how you may hear there is no law beyond do what thou wilt and think that means that nothing can be a wrong action and you can do whatever you want. He constantly explained that was not the truth, that that's not what that meant. He explained that there are actions that are wrong and false because they don't conform to the true will and they're out of harmony with natural law. And he also explained that actions that do conform to the true will are considered to be true and correct. So it's very important to keep in mind. Crowley stressed this himself throughout his writings and his commentaries on his own writings. So, again, do what thou wilt can often be misunderstood to mean do whatever you want, but that's not what it means. It is the origin of the true will that directs our path in life. To understand and act upon the true will is considered enlightenment to someone who follows the Thelemic philosophy, the philosophy of Thelema. The goal of Thelema would be to understand and perform the true will. The true will directs the individual toward their own personal destiny and puts them into a state of joy of accomplishing what they were meant to accomplish. Okay, so ultimately it is about fulfillment. It is about true enlightenment, not about just being happy. That would be doing the lowercase will. I just want to follow anything that makes me happy. This is a big New Age teaching going around in the New Age community. Do the thing that makes you the most happy. Wrong. That's hedonism. It's not about, the true will is not about hedonism. It's not about just doing whatever you want. That's lowercase w will. All right? It's about doing what the universe wants us to do to free ourselves and to experience truth, love, and freedom in the world. That's the true will. Okay? And again, it's about doing this without lust for result, which Crowley called it. No attachment to the outcome. Do it because it's the right thing to do, even if nobody else is doing it. Doesn't matter. I'm going to speak the truth if no one else is speaking it and if everyone is against me, because it's the truth. And the truth cannot be made into something that is untrue. It's that which is. Therefore, I'm going to be on that side. That is the side of rightness. Okay? And I'm going to do that work regardless of who else is doing it. That's doing the true will. So, one last thing that Crowley said in his book or his collection of writings later in his life called Magic Without Tears. He said, a man whose conscious will. Now I want people to really listen to this saying. I think it's one of Crowley's most important quotes, and it's very little known. In Magic Without Tears, Crowley said, a man whose conscious will is at odds with his true will is wasting his strength. And I would add on to that, he's ultimately wasting his life. If you're in a state of internal contradiction, your conscious will, what you know in the ego will, in the thoughts that are within the mind, the actual verbal chatter that you have in your head on a day-to-day basis, that conscious lowercase w will, if you know, you can tell that it's at odds with the true will, it's a wasteful life. You should strive to reconciliate those contradictions in whatever way possible, especially if they're conscious. If you're unconscious of that higher will, you know, in many ways you're in a better spot than if you're conscious of it. If you're conscious of it and still not doing it, there's a big problem. Okay, that's what Crowley is saying here. You're wasting your strength, and strength he considered equivalent with courage. The strength card in the Thoth deck is the courage card in many of the other decks. The woman holding the lion's jaws open. Crowley elevated this in his deck to the highest position of the macrocosmic tree of life. He felt it more than justice that the universe was attempting cosmically to create courage, that was its ultimate expression and purpose, which hence the 8 and 11 reversal in his tarot deck. So he elevated courage and strength to the highest position in the cosmos. And I would partially agree with that. I don't favor that reversal in the tarot deck myself, but I understand why Crowley did it. And, you know, it's very, very important saying right there. A man whose conscious will is at odds with his true will is wasting his strength. It's all about courage to align oneself to the higher will. All right, so let's move on and talk about a little bit more about Crowley's life. In 1905, his wife Rose gave birth to their first child, Lilith, who unfortunately died the following year from typhoid fever. Many of Crowley's children that he sired were died at early ages. Unfortunately, I guess you know, infant health and conditions, medical conditions, as far as living conditions at younger ages, and care for young babies at the time was certainly not as good as where it is now in the modern world, and you had a lot of infant mortality compared to today. So he lost his first daughter, Lilith, who died at the age of 1. The same year, Rose gave birth to Crowley's second daughter named Lola. In 1907, Crowley began writing more books penned in automatic writing, otherwise known as channeling. So we have to understand a lot of the spiritual writings that came through Crowley were channeled. These books subsequently became known as the Holy Books of Thelema, and they became the foundation for the philosophy of the Thelemic tradition. Crowley ultimately left the Golden Dawn, the order which he was inducted into by his lifelong friend George Cecil Jones and others of the order. He left the Golden Dawn in late 1907, and along with his friend George Cecil Jones and another friend, John F.C. Fuller, he proceeded to found his own magical order known as the AA. Its full name was the Fraternitatis Argenteum Astrum, which means, in Latin, the Brotherhood of the Silver Star. This order drew heavily upon the occultic works of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and other occultic works of Crowley's time, and also infused a lot of course, Crowley's own writings and occultism into the workings of the order. The Silver Star emblem can be seen in slide number 1. It's a magical sigil of a 7-pointed star and various instances of the number 7, and the word Babylon, representative of one of the workings of Crowley, known as the Babylon working, on the sigil for the order. It says in Latin around it, Sigillum Sanctum Fraternitatis AA, which stands for the Holy Seal or Sigil of the Brotherhood of the Silver Star. In the year 1909, his wife Rose unfortunately had to be institutionalized for alcoholism because she began drinking very heavily after the death of their first daughter. And this prompted a divorce between her and Crowley. Crowley offered to have the reason for the divorce listed as his infidelity, so it would look unfavorably upon him instead of her. So he and Rose remained friends after that for quite some time, but eventually Crowley moved on after the divorce and took a new love interest. Her name was Lila Waddell. And he called her, as he called many of his love interests, his Scarlet Woman, the concept of the Scarlet Woman, which is associated with the Whore of Babylon in biblical teachings. And again, Crowley was famous for his rebellion against organized traditionalist Christianity, and therefore equated the women in his life with the Whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, the woman in red. I guess this also goes hand in hand with, base desires of, desire of someone in a sexual nature as well. But it would not be considered to be considered that he was being disrespectful toward her. The women who he, I guess, conferred this term upon did not look disfavorably upon it and just saw it as a, kind of a nickname that he would give to them that was affectionate in some way. So they didn't disapprove of being referred to as the Scarlet Woman. Later in the year of 1909, Crowley began publishing his periodical for the AA. And this was called the Equinox. Many, many editions came out, and a whole lot of reviews of occult works, writings, Crowley's own analysis on magical workings, on occult ideologies are contained in the Equinox. Very extensive. He billed the periodical as his review of scientific illuminism. So it was kind of what he considered a scientific view of spiritual illumination in the modern world. In the year 1912, he published one of his other very known works called The Book of Lies, and I am going to go through this a bit as well. That same year, he was inducted into a Rosicrucian-based order known as the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis in Latin, and in English that is the Order of the Eastern Templars. He was inducted into this society in 1912. Crowley's Thelemic philosophy strongly influenced the subsequent teachings of this order as well, and still do to this day, as they consider themselves a group that postulates and expounds the Thelemic philosophies of Crowley. So the Book of Lies. Let me see. Let me continue a little bit with a little bit more of Crowley's life, and then we'll go back to the philosophy. I'd like to do it that way. Yes.
Can I comment, Mark?
Sure.
You brought up in your recent lecture on the Matrix Trilogy Decoded, you solved something for me that had bothered me for years. I would always see a lady in a red dress in these films through the years, through the decades, and you said a few words which just made something click in my consciousness. You said the woman in the red dress symbolizes getting off the path of what you're meant to do here, or what you would term as true will. And
yes.
Oh my gosh, that was a culted veil just pulled from my eyes, and I hope that helps others. That the woman in the red dress, the scarlet woman, the whore of Babylon, whatnot, but the symbol of the woman in a red outfit or red dress, leading us astray through our base desires, our base consciousness. So that was amazing, and I just wanted to comment on that might help people. But yes, the woman in the red dress is an important symbol in occultism, but it means getting away from the true will, getting away from doing the great work. Because Crowley even said in his writings, this is a world of sorrow, and we all instinctually know that something is wrong as we start to become consciously aware in this existence. Something is dreadfully wrong, and what that is we're not following that true will, capital W. We're following our base will, and we have to turn away. Thanks, Mark.
That's exactly right, Bob, and a great way to put it as well. Exactly. When we were following the, quote, woman in the red dress, this is distraction for our work. This is getting sidelined from the course that the true will wants to take us on in our lifetimes. We're sidelining ourselves, and we're following lower base instinctual desire pursuits. In other words, it's saying, let my will be done, not thy will be done, meaning the will of creation. You're saying, let my ego-driven, selfish base will be served instead of me doing the work to serve the will of creation. So, absolutely, a great analysis on that, and I'm glad that my little analysis of the Matrix series of allegorical movies was able to help you to come to that understanding. So I'm going to continue with the analysis of Crowley's life, the synopsis of Crowley's life, and then go back to an analysis of some of his philosophies. I think that'll help move things on a little bit more quickly. So let me just go down the rest of the main events of Crowley's life. He traveled extensively in America during the years 1914 to 1918. And many speculate that he was working as an intelligence agent for Great Britain during World War I at the time, to gather intelligence on German spies operating within the United States. Whether that's definitively true or not, I can't definitely say, but it certainly makes sense. It's a distinct possibility anyway. While he was in America, Crowley formed a relationship with the artist Leah Hirsig, who became his new Scarlet Woman. And I'm just going to briefly make an aside here to talk about something that is very speculated on. Again, I can't say for sure. Many people say that Crowley fathered Barbara Bush, the father of George W. Bush and wife of George H.W. Bush. This is speculation also. It's possible. I wouldn't say that it's definite or conclusive, but Crowley did seem to have a relationship, an intimate relationship with Barbara Bush's mother, Pauline Pierce. And when she gave birth to Barbara Pierce, Barbara Pierce was born either from her claimed birth father or possibly Aleister Crowley, because Barbara Bush's mother, Pauline Pierce, actually engaged in sex magic relations with Crowley and other members of the kind of, I guess you could say, coven or order that he had put together while in the United States. And they were practitioners of sex magic, incorporating sex and orgiastic ritual-type sexual behavior in with their magical practices. And some speculate that Barbara Pierce, who became Barbara Bush, was born out of wedlock during these times of these sexual magic practices, and possibly impregnated by Crowley. Now, there is a resemblance there if you look at pictures of Barbara Bush, but again, that's not definitive. It's speculation put forward by many people, and it may very well be the case. After his years in the United States, he moved to Palermo, Italy in 1920 with Leah Hirsig and their newly born daughter, Anne. Anne also died at under 1 year of age. She died at 8 months of age, unfortunately. While in Palermo, Italy, Crowley founded what became known as the Abbey of Thelema, which was what he described as an anti-monastery or an anti-ashram. Life there wasn't regimented as it was in traditional abbeys, monasteries, or ashrams. Crowley didn't look at that as a method of spiritual practice, of denying the self the indulgences and pleasures. He instead looked at it as a place to live life to its fullest of free will and pleasure, but at the same time attempting to get in touch with the higher self and understand and formulate the true will and do the true will. While he was at the Abbey and other followers who gathered there in Palermo, Italy with him, Crowley would practice sex magic, Goetia, which is spirit summoning, and ritual magic. He also, while there in Palermo, impregnated another female member of the Abbey named Shumway, who gave birth to another daughter, who they named Astarte, after the goddess. After a mishap during one of their magical ceremonies at the Abbey, which was most likely, I believe it was, drug-related, one of the followers of Crowley accidentally died. And this incident created a whole lot of negative publicity in the British press and the Italian press. And Crowley, through the British press in particular, became labeled as the wickedest man in the world for his occult rites that he conducted at the Abbey of Thelema. And this press really stuck with him for the rest of his life and kind of gave him his bad name to a large extent. Now, I'm not saying Crowley was any kind of, totally holy man or holy figure. His writings were certainly high-minded spiritual writings, and the man most certainly fell from that path and oftentimes walked the path of a sorcerer. We'll talk about the difference between magic and sorcery in a moment, but I don't look at Crowley as somebody who very stringently stuck to his own words. Again, it's an instance of do as I say, not as I do. I don't look at the way Crowley lived his life as an ideal to aspire toward, but I do look at his writings as ideals to aspire toward. And that's the way I see the man versus what he put forward as far as spiritual teachings. So, when the fascist government of Italy, when Mussolini's fascist government came in the 1920s, they expelled Crowley from Italy. Luckily, actually, because, they could have done a lot worse to him. But he was kicked out of Italy in 1923 and kicked out of the Abbey of Thelema. This kind of sent him on somewhat of a downward spiral. He kind of lived at near bankruptcy, helped by friends from that point forward. He married briefly again in 1929 to a woman named Maria de Miramar while in Leipzig, Germany. They separated the following year and, never saw one another again. So it was a very short-lived marriage. He declared bankruptcy in 1934, went on to father one other son, I believe it was his only son that he fathered, and he named him Alistair after himself. The mother was one of his Scarlet Women named Patricia McAlpine. Between 1938 and 1943, Crowley developed his own tarot deck. Well, I think this is one of the crowning achievements of his occult or magical career. He worked on the deck with Lady Frida Harris, who painted the images of each card as Crowley described the images to her. It's just a phenomenal imagery. If you don't own one of the Thoth tarot decks, you're missing out. I mean, I'll try to post the images of the Thoth deck with the podcast as well, so people can get an idea of what this absolutely magnificent deck looks like, and can also contemplate the images of this tarot deck. But this was considered one of his greatest works, I think. He called the deck, of course, this tarot deck variant, the Thoth deck, named after the Egyptian creator god Thoth. Different pronunciations for that: Thoth, 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 Thought. I simply say Thoth. But in 1944, Crowley released an analysis of this Thoth deck. He called it the Book of Thoth. It was his extensive treatise on the tarot itself, and it proved to be his best-selling work during his career. Unfortunately, the actual deck was never mass-produced and distributed during Crowley's lifetime. It became mass-produced and distributed by the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, in 1969, well after Crowley's death. So unfortunately, he never actually got to see these majestic paintings put into the actual tarot deck form and distributed widely. Now this deck is all over the world. In January of 1945, Crowley moved to Netherwood, a boarding house in Hastings, England. He developed asthma later in his life. Some say that was because of his liberal, use of drugs during his life, and smoked a lot of hashish, opium, etc. Never, I guess, really determined what led to his asthmatic condition. But he eventually became addicted to heroin after having been prescribed opiates like morphine for his asthmatic condition. Crowley died at Netherwood Boarding House in Hastings, England, from respiratory infection on December 1st, 1947, at the age of 72. So that's a wrap-up of Crowley's, significant moments of his life. Let's go back to some of his philosophy and writing. We took a look at the Book of the Law. We took a look at the True Will. I want to maybe proceed in order of the slides as I have them on the slideshow, and take a look at slide number 5. Slide number 5 is Crowley's definition of magic, and I put it there with a C and a K in parentheses. Crowley's spelling of magic was M-A-G-I-C-K to distinguish it from the fairy tale book version of magic. And his definition for what magic was the science and art of influencing change to occur in accordance with the true will, the higher case W, the capital W will, okay? So this is the process of alchemy. This is the great work, as we've said. It's truth, love, freedom in that order. That's the magical formula. It's helping change to occur in accordance with that higher will of creation. So you're learning the truth. You're taking it into yourself as a vessel. You're distilling it. You're bringing it forward for others so it can help them awaken, so it can help them come out of mind control, so it can help them understand what true freedom is and then live that way in the world. And that's what he saw as magic. And this very significantly departs from what I call sorcery, and many other researchers have dubbed sorcery, which is very similar to the definition of magic, but it is ultimately accomplishing and serving a completely different purpose. The definition of sorcery I give as being the science and art of influencing change to occur in accordance with the will, lowercase w. These are the same definitions as you speak them from your mouth, but mean two completely antithetical, diametrically opposed things. Magic influencing change to occur in accordance with the higher will, the true will, has creation's goal, its will, as the end result. That's what you're serving. That's the force you're serving. You're serving the higher self. You're serving all of creation. You could, if you don't have a problem with the word, you could say you're serving the God of creation. And that's how I look at what magic is. And this was Crowley's definition for magic. Sorcery is the exact opposite of that. It's serving the ego. It's serving what I want. Me, me, me. Okay? It has nothing to do with what's right. It has nothing to do with what's moral. It has nothing to do with what's just. It's whatever I want. That's the egoic will of the sorcerer itself. The lowercase w will. The base desires are being fed at all times. And that's what sorcery is. And I put an image of what I consider to be a reflection of sorcery better than anything else. You could put the sorcerer with the magic wand or the crystal ball or shooting the lightning zap out of his wand. And, these are all great Hollywood interpretations of sorcery. But I tend to look at it as a puppet master pulling the strings of somebody who is just going to dance to the tune that the puppet master plays. Somebody else has you. They have your will. They have you on their strings, and they can make you dance because ultimately you've externalized your power and you've given it over to them. And this is where most of the people of the world are today. They're on those strings, dancing. As harsh as that may sound, it's also true. So, another concept in slide number 7 that Crowley constantly talked about was his holy guardian angel. And, we each have this connection. This wasn't something just for Crowley by any stretch of the imagination. This was something that we all can get in touch with. If you don't like the term, call it something else. This is just simply what he called it. His view of the holy guardian angel was a deeper connection to the higher self, which guides us toward the true will. And I don't even call it our true will. I call it the true will. There's really only one. Just like there's really only one ego, there's really only one lowercase will, too. You could say, it's all about what that person wants and that person wants and that person wants, but ultimately they're all serving the same force, which is the ego. People say, well, everybody has an ego, and I say I beg to differ. It isn't so much that everyone has an ego, it's that the ego has everyone. It's the opposite way around. We're all trapped within the force of the ego and need to get out of it. So the holy guardian angel was what Crowley considered a way to get out of the ego. It was what would guide us toward our true will and get us to ultimately do the true will if we accepted that mission and if we didn't constantly try to reject it or stay in opposition to it because we were so trapped in ego. So it's a deeper connection to the higher self. For the holy guardian angel to manifest in our lives, we need to learn to listen to its wisdom by quieting the voice of the ego. This is what meditative and contemplative practices can help us to do. Quiet the ego-driven voice, which is all about me, 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 getting what I want. Okay, and ultimately you're serving that demonic force that ultimately has humanity in its grip. The ego ever seeks to take us off the path of wisdom, while the holy guardian angel ever helps to guide us and keep us on the path of wisdom. Crowley called his own holy guardian angel I Was. And if you do the Greek gematria on the name I Was, the name also totals 93 in Greek gematria. Very significant and very synchronistic. So before I move on to the Book of Lies, I want to go over some more gematria or numerology as put forward by Crowley. He often, again, on his mother's nicknaming him the Beast, used the term the Great Beast or to Megatherion 666. But Crowley understood what that number was all about and why it was used in dark occultism.
Hello, Mark. We seem to have lost my friend Mark. Well, I'll try to bring Mark up here in a moment. But yes, in the meantime, it is amazing, the works of Aleister Crowley. But yes, the Holy Guardian Angel, very interesting, and these magicians. So Crowley was a ceremonial magician, and as Mark said, the Golden Dawn was the starter for Crowley, and this is the order that Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers had created. So, but this order, so Crowley got into this. Now, I want to share that I recently, my information came from this giant tome of a biography written by Israel Regardie, who was Crowley's secretary from 1928 to 1930. He flew this young 20-year-old student out to live with him for 2 years straight. And that's an ironic choice of words, but because Crowley was a notorious homosexual, and back then, of course, that was ultimately taboo. But Regardie said he was always concerned of the 2 years that he lived there with Crowley that somehow Crowley would make an advance on him. And ironically enough, Regardie said that at no time did Crowley ever go into that kind of world with him. But Regardie was also a student of the Golden Dawn. And to this day, he is regarded as almost a negative persona non grata, or non gratis for the Golden Dawn, the surviving membership. And I know that there's, some people say that the Golden Dawn has never, it has not, it disappeared at some stage. It didn't hold on to what was going on. So, but at any rate, what I'm going to do, I am going to try to bring my good friend Mark Passio back on. But in the meantime, I have a very short interlude. So grab that cup of coffee and come right back. We will be right back. Okay, my friends, I hope we are back. Let's see where Passio is. Mark says Blog Talk seems to have dropped the whole connection. So Mark says, won't let you. All right, well, I am back on, at least. That's a good start. I'm going to add Mark to the call here. Add people. Where is Mark at? Okay.
Hello, Bob. Are we back?
I believe so, Mark. I believe we're on, my friend.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like Blog Talk kicked me out of the call, and I called back in and continuously got a busy signal. Not sure why that happened. I've never experienced it before, but these problems come up, and let's just take it right from where we left off.
Absolutely.
We want to roll.
Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, great. All right, so let's see. I was getting ready to talk about some other occult numerology in Crowley's Thelemic system, and explaining that he was often called the Great Beast 666 to Megatherion, which means the Great Beast. This appellation given to him by his mother, because he went against his Christian upbringing. But I don't think Crowley was a dark magician or a dark occultist, as some people seem to think, because he embraced that term. He understood what the term really meant and why it was called beast consciousness, why it was called, being the beast, 666. This number and its associated number, 777, need to be really understood in conjunction with each other if we are to understand one of the most important numbers in Thelema, which is 93. So the number 666, of course, this comes from biblical writings. The Book of Revelation talks about it being the number of man, not the number of a man. That's a mistranslation, actually. It comes from the number being talked about as the number of man, which means that all of mankind is actually trapped in this state of consciousness. Man in base consciousness, in which his thoughts, emotions, and actions are not unified and complete. So each digit could be seen as an aspect of consciousness. The first could be seen as thought. The second or middle digit, the middle six, could be seen as emotion, and the third could be seen as action. And the reason that they're all sixes is because 6 is considered a number of incompletion, of not being there yet, being, I guess you could say, half-baked. It's incomplete. It needs more work. It is not accomplished. The goal is to transcend that condition of base consciousness. That's what we're talking about here. That's what, Thelema and the philosophy of the Thelemic tradition is all about. It's about using care in conjunction with the will to acquire spiritual knowledge of truth, and move forward and ascend in consciousness so that we can free ourselves. So the number of the beast, 666, represents man in base consciousness or beast consciousness, okay? Not being fully realized as a true human being, a spiritual being having a human experience. To get to the complete or unified expression of humanity, we need to become the 777. And this is the number of man in a complete or unified state. Thought, emotion, and action, they're all unified, and they're all raised to their fullest expression. It's not man as God. It's man in a state of consciousness that resembles the divine or has the divine spark ignited within it. That's what 777 means, okay? So it's man in unity consciousness, not in dualism anymore, in internal opposition. The internal opposition has been rectified, and man is unified in his thoughts, emotions, and actions. That's the 777 state of consciousness. If we do gematria, the gematria reduction, meaning we're going to add the digits in 666, and then we're going to, if we get a two-digit number, we're going to add them again together until we get a single-digit number. So let's do this. 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. So the reduction in occult numerology, in gematria, of 666 is 9. That's what they would call the reduction. You're adding it, getting your value, and then adding the digits of that value until you get down to a single digit. That's why they call it a reduction. You're starting at 3 digits, then going to 2, then going to 1. So 9 and 666 are equivalents. So 9 would be considered base consciousness, or the equivalent of 666. If we do the reduction of 777, we get 21. 7 plus 7 plus 7 equals 21. 2 plus 1 equals 3. So that's the reduction of 777. They mean the same thing. They are equivalent in gematria. So to go from the 666 to the 777, or to go from base consciousness to higher consciousness, is the same as going from the 9 to the 3. So Crowley used the number 93 in the Thelemic tradition to represent this idea. 93 was doing the true will. 93 was coming out of beast consciousness and going to higher consciousness, to unity consciousness, to awakened divine consciousness. So the number 93 is kind of seen as the number for Thelema. Okay, and again, it's also the number of the word Thelema. When we add the digits of Thelema together, we get 93. When we add the digits of the word love in the Greek language together, we get the number 93. All of these things are equivalent to each other. So that's one of the first things to keep in mind. It represents the ascension out of ego, consciousness, and duality into love, will, and unity consciousness. It reduces the 3, so it's the equivalent to 777. The number 93 itself, 9 plus 3 is 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. It's equivalent to 777, 93. And this is because there's a property of 9 that equates it with base consciousness as a number itself, okay? And just let me run briefly through this. The additive property of 9, okay, when we add 9 to anything, 9 plus 1 is 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. So we go back to where we started. We added 9 to 1. We start with 1, we add 9, we get 10. Doing the reduction of 1 and 0 simply gives us 1. We're back to where we started. 2 plus 9 is 11. 1 plus 1 gives us 2 in the reduction. Okay? We're back to where we started at 2. 3 plus 9 is 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. We're back to where we started. You take any number and add 9 to it, nothing changes. It's like adding a 0 because it represents base consciousness. When you add base consciousness to anything, you can't accomplish any change. No change is possible when you're adding more ego and base consciousness to the situation. So that's why 9 is considered the number of the beast. And even in Satanism, they'll tell you the number of Satan is 9. It's considered 9 because it's the number of the ego. And for this reason, mostly, the multiplicative properties of the number 9 are even more telling. 9 times 2 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. 3 plus 6 is 9. 9 times 5 is 45. 4 plus 5 is 9. It doesn't matter what number you multiply by 9, you automatically come back to 9, which is why it's considered the number of the ego. Whenever you multiply ego by anything, you multiply it into anything, all you get is more ego. That's what that concept represents in occult numerology. So this is why the number 93 was so powerful. You're getting rid of the illusion. You're transcending the illusion of base consciousness and attachment to ego, and you're raising your vibratory energy up to the level of the man in unity consciousness. You know, this is the number 3, the Trinity, thought, emotion, and action, unified and non-dual, not in a state of internal contradiction. So this is why 93 was considered a very powerful occult number in Thelemic tradition and in their system of gematria. Another number that was often talked about, we're going to talk about this when we get to the Book of Oz, was the number 77, which represented only 2 out of the 3 sevens being present in the 777. This gives us only 14 out of the possible 21, which is 2/3 of the result. And having 2/3 present is also a representative of the beast, because when you divide 3 into 2, taking a decimal from the fraction 2/3, you end up with a repeating 6-digit, .66666 to infinity. And this, again, represents it's incomplete. Something is missing. Something needs to be there. This is why it's considered the number of sorcery in many different occult traditions, because it represents the intellect combined with the will, often the lowercase will, but it's devoid of true care. It's devoid of true compassion. And it's one short of the total number of the tarot deck, 78, which represents the book of truth. The number of cards in the tarot deck is 78, and 77 is one short of that. So this concept of one short of the result is failure or incompletion. and I believe it's why Crowley put 77 on the Book of Oz, because he was saying that man has yet to understand this, and that's why the Aeon of Horus has yet to dawn. So that's another very significant figure, a significant number in Thelemic gematria. Two other numbers associated closely with Thelema, the number 23 and the number 418, 418. And I'll briefly go over these. I'll briefly go over 418. I'll save 23 for later, for actually a little later, because I'm going to get into the Book of Lies, which the number 23 plays prominently in. The number 418 was considered Crowley's magical working, his magical formula. He had the power word. He used the power word in his workings and rituals, abrahadabra, not to be confused with the word abracadabra. Crowley replaced the C with the H, which he considered the breath of life and the unifying spiritual aspect of all creation, the breath, the Hay character. Okay, so abrahadabra, he considered the word of the Aeon of Horus, the word that would be the dawning of the Aeon of Horus. It was the word of manifestation in the occult tradition that he practiced. It represented the great work being done, being accomplished, which is what we're working for, the manifestation of the true will. This is the very interesting part of the number 418 and the number abrahadabra. It translates, it comes from an Aramaic word which translates as I create as I speak. I create as I speak. And I've often said the universe is spoken into existence. The universe is spoken into creation. Our words are much more important than we realize. The world is controlled through words. And the dark result, the dark manifestation that we're receiving in the world is actually a result of spells, of speaking, of words being obfuscated and the meaning of words being obfuscated in our minds, such that we can be made to believe whatever the sorcerers of this world want us to believe, because they're twisting words and putting ideas into our minds through the obfuscation of definitions of words or spells. So I create as I speak is very powerful meaning, a very powerful meaning for the term abrahadabra, the word of the Aeon of Horus, as Crowley called it, because it is exactly the principle of that we are creating the universe according to the words that we are putting forward, because the words become our understanding of an idea or a concept, and that is the basis for behavior, which is ultimately directing what we are experiencing, what we do. Okay, and that's built upon what we know, which ultimately comes from what we speak and what is spoken to us. So very, very powerful that abrahadabra means I create as I speak, and was the word of the dawning of this new age that Crowley talked about in a lot of his writings. So what I want to do is break down one particular section of the Book of Lies, as Crowley called it, because I think this is one of the things that explains that Crowley used a lot of green language, alchemical language, word plays and puns. He liked to do that in his writings, and he talked in code a lot in much of his writings and poetry. This is why people who try to take Crowley literally are not going to understand anything. You're going to think it's the ramblings of a madman, and you're not going to really grasp what he was saying. He deliberately did this. One, he did this because as part of an occult tradition, many people feel that understanding should be reserved only for those who really want them, who really want it. And you should not try to, quote, cast pearls before swine. I look at that as kind of an elitist philosophy and a luxury that we don't really have right now at the current time we're living in because of how dangerous and precarious the current human situation is. I think we need to put things out there in a more egalitarian fashion and in a way that simply puts the truth out there for those with the eyes and ears to see it in as free and open of a manner as possible. That is my approach, and I encourage that approach to those who would be a de-occultist, as I consider myself. But Crowley in the Book of Lies very much wrote in code and wordplay and word puns, and I want to break down the chapter 23 in the Book of Lies, Crowley had prefixes for his chapters, which he gave Greek letters, and it was the heading of the chapter. This chapter he called Kappa Gamma, and in front of it he spelled out the name head in Greek. Okay, the word head in Greek is kephale. It's where we get the word cephalic from, which means related to the head in medical jargon. Okay, so kephale in Greek is spelled kappa, epsilon, phi, which is how it's pronounced. Many people say phi, alpha, lambda, eta. And that's basically the beginning of each chapter, but then he had a couple of characters after that as the designation for this chapter, which is kappa gamma. So let's just briefly look at that in and of itself, okay? Kephale in Greek, the word in English means head. And then the word kappa gamma does not mean anything in Greek. So if we transliterate it into the English, kappa is the Greek word for the Greek letter for the English letter K, and gamma transliterates into English as G. And this is, again, we're referring to chapter 23 of Crowley's Book of Lies here. KG, right? The letter K and the letter G. Now, if you were going to try to speak that, some people will go kug, okay? But if you simply say the word K, the letter K, and then just add the hard G sound, K-J, cage, cage, okay? So what he was actually saying is head cage. That's the title of the chapter. The title of the chapter is Head Cage. Think about it for a moment. A prison of the mind. Okay? A prison for the mind. The head cage. This is how a lot of Crowley's writings need to be written. They need to be contemplated. You often need to know gematria, equivalence, and numerology. You often need to know the meanings of certain words in other languages. You need to be able to take the letters in and out of different languages to transliterate them from one language to another. He was definitely a person who was skilled in ciphers, in encryption. Some people say that came out of his work with British intelligence, and it very well may have. So this chapter starts with one word in all capital letters. It's chapter 23, which is the whole concept of the number 23 being very important and part of spiritual awakening. And he starts it with the capitalized word skidoo, S-K-I-D-O-O. Now, many people will be unfamiliar with this word. You may have heard the phrase 23 skidoo. Yes. Older people in the audience may have heard this. Many people don't know really where it comes from. It's a saying that seemingly came out of nowhere in the 1920s while Crowley lived, okay? And it meant to remove yourself from some sort of a situation while you were still in a position that it was comfortable to do so. Or in other words, to get out while the getting was good. So if you're at some kind of a social situation and a wife of the let's say the people who hosted the party, a wife just found out that her husband was cheating on her in one of the bedrooms, at the party. You might want to do the 23 skidoo before all of the negative fallout from that happens right then and there at the party and you're caught up in the middle of it. So the 23 skidoo was considered, let's get out of here while the getting is good. We'll make a quick disappearance before anything gets too hairy. That's what 23 skidoo meant in a nutshell. And that's what Crowley is alluding to here. He's saying 23 skidoo, get out while the getting is good, referring to the head cage. Referring to, right now, we have the opportunity to free our minds. We have the opportunity to understand cosmic spiritual law, understand what rights we do have, what rights we don't have, stop trying to take actions that we don't have the right to do, stop capitulating to other people who want to take actions that they have no right to do and strip us of our rights in the process, and get out of this whole situation while the getting is good. Because if we don't take that opportunity, there's going to be a real hairy situation coming up in which we wish that we had taken the opportunity when it was presented to us and when the getting was good, when the getting out was good. That's what he means here. So he continues on in this chapter and he says, what man is at ease in his inn? Now, this is more word flow play. What man is at ease in his inn? What man is at ease in his sin? Okay, it's a flow of word play. What man is at ease in his sin is what he's saying. You shouldn't be at ease in your sin. You should want to get out of it. You should want to get out of the state that you are sinning, that you are actively doing or condoning wrong doings to other people, okay? Which is basically the aggression ideology that I talked about so extensively in my work. We need to stop supporting it. We need to stop doing it. We need to stop participating in it. We need to understand what our rights are and only do those actions which are within our rights to do, because those actions don't cause harm to others, and hence they are our right. And we need to stop doing the things that do cause harm to others, because it's not one of our rights. That's the definition of a wrong. An action that causes harm to others is a wrong, and we need to stop doing that. And that's what would be in traditional religious language called sin, and we shouldn't be at ease in that state. It should make us feel uncomfortable, and we should have a desire to get out of it. So the next thing he says is get out. And he repeats this over and over and over, to get out, meaning get out of the mind control, get out of the head cage, free your mind, and get out of the situation that humanity is in while the getting is still good, because it's going to be a lot more uncomfortable as it goes on if we decide to stay in that head cage. So he says, wide is the world and cold, the cold, wide world, more pun. Okay, that the world is cold. You know, we are not spiritually awake and active. We have become cold. We don't care. You know, our emotions are not, turned on to their full extent. Our minds are not turned on to their full extent. We're not doing the actions that we really need to be doing to heal ourselves and others. So, you know, we're in a cold, wide world, in other words. And he says, get out again. Get out. Thou hast become an initiate, but he hyphenates it, an initiate, meaning you're in, and you like it being in there, okay? You like it in that prison, in that cell within the mind. You're an initiate, okay? You need to get out. And he says again after that, get out. But thou canst not get out by the way thou camest in. In other words, the way out is not through the ego and through the dualistic thinking that got you into this mess. It's about unity consciousness is the way out. He says the way out is the way, meaning the middle way of the Kabbalah and other traditions like Freemasonry. Okay? The middle way is not playing the left-hand path, the path of the controller, and not playing the right-hand path, just simply laying down the control and not standing up for yourself enough for your rights. This is about the middle path. I'm going to exert I'm going to embody the sacred feminine, the right-hand path, the sacred feminine aspect of true compassion and true care, and the non-aggression principle, which is the true right-hand path, in conjunction with the true left-hand path of I'm not going to be a controller, but I am not going to not stand up for myself when violence is being conducted unto me, and I'm going to understand that I have a right to use physical force when my rights are being accosted and usurped. And somebody doesn't have the right to just tell me, I can do this to you with impunity and you have no right to respond. Okay? That's the true sacred masculine path. And these two need to be combined in the middle way. I'm not advocating that I control anyone else. I control myself. And I have the right to self-defense. That's the left-hand aspect together. And the right-hand aspect is the compassion, the care, the sacred feminine principle of the non-aggression principle, and it's also about caring enough to stand up for yourself when your rights are being violated. Okay, you don't go into one form of imbalance or another. It's the middle path that you should strive for, which is represented by the middle pillar of Freemasonry and the middle path on the Kabbalistic tree of life, the path that leads directly from Malkut to Keter, or from physical world identified consciousness to unity consciousness. and that path leads through the heart. Okay, it leads to true care, which is the Tiferet Sephirot on the tree of life. So Crowley continues in chapter 23 of the Book of Lies. He says, out is love and wisdom and power. Now, these are the three aspects of consciousness. Love, the expression of emotion. Okay, this is Tiferet on the tree of life. Wisdom, okay, this is the expression of our thoughts and the knowledge that we have gained and putting that into practice in our lives. And you could equate this with Chokmah, which is wisdom. And power, you could attribute that to, I believe it is Hod, or Netzah. I believe it's Netzah, which means strength, okay? And this is the equivalent of true courage and will. It's courage and will. It's Hod and Netzah put together on the tree of life, which is the rung on the tree that is just above Yesod, or the desire to come out of base consciousness. So Crowley is alluding to Kabbalistic tradition here with these words, love, wisdom, and power, but he's also referencing the three modes of consciousness, which is emotion, thought, and action, in that order, okay? And he says again after making this statement, for out is love, wisdom, and power, all right? He says, get out. If thou hast T already, first get U-T, or ut, then get O, and so at last get out. Now, I made a chart here on slide number 10 to show some of the things that Crowley means by these letters. And again, this is my interpretation of this. People might have different or varying interpretations, but in general, this is what Crowley meant by O, U, and T in the word out. Again, he's using these as concepts, as symbolic concepts, by the very shape of the letters and what he's associating them with Kabbalistically, and through other traditions as well, like tarot. Many people have seen these as different tarot cards that he's explaining that we need to develop different aspects of the self in order to get out of the head cage. So I look at the O as the feminine essence. This is the womb of creation, the cosmic egg, if you will, the symbol of the letter O. It's the yin energy. It's Shakti in the Eastern traditions. It would be seen as Isis, the sacred feminine in the Egyptian or Cometian tradition. This is the realm of pure potentiality from which anything can be created. It is also the realm of truth, that we need to peel back the veil to get to the truth that the goddess represents. It's the universe. It's the totality of the all, the one thing that is the no thing, that is about spiritual expression, and hence the zero, or the O, the egg, the ovum, okay? The womb of creation. I'll take the T next, and then we'll go back to the U. The T is the masculine essence. Okay, this is the masculine aspect of one's consciousness. It is the yang energy. All right, you could look at this as this is the outward pushing force, whereas the O is the inward accepting force. Okay, some would look at the masculine as the positive, or the anode, I believe, and the negative, the cathode. I'm not sure if I have those reversed, but I think I had it right. So, in other words, the O could be looked at as the dark lunar negative, not negative meaning bad, but a negative as far as, like an electrical system would go, the receptive. And the T is the masculine or the outward pushing force, okay? It is yang energy. It is considered the Shiva energy in the Eastern traditions. The Horus is who it would resonate with in the Egyptian tradition. It is, instead of the womb, this would be the phallus. Okay, it is the wand or the phallus. The shape of the T is the Tau cross, which represented male virility and power. It's active strength. It's courage. It's will and courage to act in the world. That's what the T symbol represents. The sacred hammer, if you will. Okay. It's our desire to know, that which pushes us forward, the desire to want to know, to want to learn, to want to grow. Okay? It's the expressive force, whereas the feminine force is the contractive or passive force. And that also is the receptive energy that allows us to receive. Okay? So where the O is the universe in this simple three-letter formula of out, the T is the monad, the individuated expression of consciousness. So it's the individual having the experience in the physical domain, the actual manifestation, the incarnation of the spirit in the physical world. Now we look at the U, which is the thing that stands between the O and the T. And it is the blending of these two things. It is the sacred union. It is the harmonization between the feminine essence and the masculine essence. It is the alchemical wedding, as we've spoken about in other traditions. And think about it. It's the word you. You. When you say you, it's you. Meaning this is you. This is what you are about, what your purpose and goal actually is. It's union with the higher self. You is the shape of a magnet, the force that draws things together, the magnetic force, okay? It's the sacred union, unison, unity consciousness, all about you. It is the true will realized and put into practice, put into manifestation. It is true self-respect, true self-discipline, and self-mastery, ultimately. It is bringing all aspects of your consciousness together as one in a holistic fashion, such that you make yourself into a being that as you think, so you feel, so you act. There is no contradiction. You're out of mind control. You cannot be manipulated by a sorcerer, and you're doing the true will. And that is expressed by the letter U, which is the synthesis between the O and the T. So that's what this whole chapter is about, and this is how we need to read Crowley's writings. They're highly symbolic, highly interpretive, and highly built upon word plays and puns that are very much linked and very much you need to have associative thinking applied to them with other occult traditions. All right, it's an interconnected web of occulted information designed specifically to awaken the consciousness to a higher level by doing the work to decode it. You're actually putting a meditative and a contemplative effort and a concentrative effort. All three modes of consciousness, of thought, are being used. You're using contemplation, meditation, and concentration to decode what he's putting forward. So that's why even dealing with and moving through the process of understanding these writings can open up a whole new world to people within themselves that they had never even contemplated or even known was there. Which is why I think that his writings are highly valuable, and I do encourage people to check them out, regardless of what you think of him as the man and the way he lived his life. Again, I can see in many cases the distinction between when Crowley wrote in a channeled capacity, when he was definitely in harmony and in the zone with the spirit, and when his lowercase W will was speaking. You could actually almost see this turn on and off in some of his writings. And you need to be aware of that and understand that, some of this is high-minded spiritual wisdom coming through Crowley as a channel, and some is Crowley the man speaking his own mind and interjecting his own lowercase W will into the mix, And that definitely needs to be understood that that's going on in Crowley's writings. So there's one other work that I want to break down, and that is Liber Oz. And again, we could spend years going through Crowley's writings and analyzing it. We have very little time, obviously, in a short one-episode show. But again, this isn't intended to be the be-all and end-all. This is intended, as I said at the beginning of the show, whet the appetite and provide introductory material for the study of some of Crowley's other writings, and just to give the basic principles of what he was putting forward and working with. So Liber Oz is arguably Crowley's most controversial writing, and for many reasons. And I consider it to be one of the only things the people of the world truly need to know. And I've said that for the first time here today on this show. And some people will be horrified by that statement because they'll read Liber Oz, interpret it in a completely convoluted way, and think that Crowley is saying something that he's not saying and that I'm agreeing with it. So controversial means, it comes from Latin. Contra means against or up against, okay? And versare, the second part of the word controversial, means to change. So it's up against changing, or you're face to face with having to change your views, your deeply held beliefs and opinions, etc. That's what controversial means. When something is controversial, that's what it really means that it's doing. It's challenging our worldview and our deeply held beliefs, the beliefs that we're very attached to. So, Crowley starts Liber Oz, which is book 77. Now, here's another thing. People will say, well, there's the word, the number of the sorcerer. Yes, and as I was saying before, the call dropped out, is that Crowley, I believe, deliberately used the number 77 because he was explaining that sorcerers basically are in control and that they are attempting to thwart the rights of man, the natural rights of man. And I don't see Liber Oz as simply book 77, which is what the Latin numerals LXXVII are, 77. I personally see it as book 777. Now, I believe Crowley may have had a book 777 as well. But see, I think that what's missing from book 77, which Crowley deliberately made it 77 to point out something's missing, is care. And it's not that he wrote the document in a state of not caring. That's not what I mean. What I think he was trying to express to humanity is that humanity doesn't care about this, the deep spiritual wisdom that is contained in this one page. Because Liber Oz is a one-page book. He calls it a book, but it's one page of writing. It's basically a series of statements. He was saying that if we want to make this book 777, we have to bring the third seven, which is held within our heart, and we have to put that forward in a capacity of true care to understand our rights and to stand up for them when they come under perilous attack by tyrants, which they already were during Crowley's time, and that agenda has advanced 100-fold since he lived right into our lifetimes. And if we don't get out of the head cage, get out, do the 23 skidoo, if you will, we're going to be in for even harder times as this agenda progresses forward that we are ensconced in right now as a species, as humanity. So let's read Liber Oz, and then I'll comment on it. He opens up with some quotes. They're all from the Book of the Law, Liber Al Vel Legis. The first is the law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world, referring to the true will. He says, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Always opened most of his books with that after penning the Book of the Law. And he says, thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. Again, I talked about that quote a little bit before, earlier tonight. In other words, do the true will, and the universe will open doors for you. It will not create obstacles for you. And finally, every man and woman is a star. We also talked about that tonight. Now, here's where the Book of Oz actually starts. It ends with two more quotes, which we'll get to, but it starts with a controversial statement. There is no God but man. Now, what I ask people to do is, if you're even looking at this on slide number 11, stop looking at it for a moment and just do a simple experiment. And, Bob, if you'll do this simple experiment with me, okay, take a piece of paper if you have one in front of you, or if not, just open a text document on your computer screen, and I want you to write down the phrase, and then God said, let there be light. Can you write that down? And then God said, let there be light. Write that phrase down on a piece of paper or type it out.
Okay.
All right? Just do that real quick. And then God said, let there be light. Okay, so this is words from the book of Genesis in English. Let me know when you've done that.
All done.
You see, this is where people don't pay attention to detail in writing often. And that's where they get into obfuscated definitions and thinking that someone said something that they didn't because they weren't paying attention closely enough. All right? So, if you have that phrase written down, what I want you to do is take a look at the word God as you have written it down and tell me if it equates with the word that is on the page there on slide number 11, Liber Oz.
Equating as how?
Meaning, is it exactly the same as it is written? Because I'll bet you it's not. I'll bet you any amount of money you wrote the word God with a capital G. Are you not?
Unfortunately, I did not because I've been staring at that slide for a while.
Almost
100%
of the people, when they are thinking of the God of creation, all right?
Uppercase.
The all. They're going to write down a capital G for the word God. Okay? Almost everybody will do that. This distinguishes it from a lowercase g God, which means something entirely different. A lowercase g God means a creator of an experience, one who set a particular result into flow, into manifestation. Okay? You set it into motion and then got a result as a result of putting a particular behavior or set of circumstances into flow. And this is what is meant in the case when there is a lower G for the word God. It means a creator of an experience, not the creator of the universe. If Crowley meant the creator of the universe, he would have written it with a capital G,
right,
to represent the God of creation. So what he's saying here, to open up the Book of Oz, is he's expressing the law of attraction, that there is total freedom in the universe. There is free will. And man is ultimately creating the experience that he gets here on earth because he is the co-creator with universal spiritual law. He is a small g God. He is not G, capital G God. That's not what he's saying. That's not what I'm saying and would never make that statement. Okay? Man, however, is this lowercase g creator of his own experience here on earth through the behaviors that he chooses of his own free will, which is given to him by the capital G, God of creation. And so he's saying there is no creator of your experience here on earth except you. You're the one who's making the experience. And when he says man, he doesn't mean the individual person. He means as a totality, humanity. Man, capital M, not a man, lowercase m. Man, mankind, in other words, the human species. No one else is creating the experience that we are living through here on earth except the human species. This isn't something that's being done to us from outside of ourselves. We are generating the experience through how we think, how we feel, and how we act. That's it. Our consciousness is creating the experience. So many people have a hard time with that because they've externalized their power. They think this is something that is being done to us, that there is, somehow people don't have control over their actions and are bound to behave a certain way like an actual computer program. And it's not the truth. We are gifted by the creator of the universe with free will to choose our decisions, no matter how much manipulatory efforts are going on in the world. Ultimately, it is up to us to choose the actions that we will take. And no one is ultimately in control of that. Someone can kill you, but they cannot make you do something. You have to choose to do it of your own free will. I don't care if there's a gun to your head. I don't care if someone will starve as a result. It is your choice. It is always your choice in every moment. And that's a very hard thing for almost every person on the earth alive at this time to hear. So few will hear that and say, yes, that's exactly as it is. Most people want to rebel against that and want to deny that that is exactly how it is. But that's what Crowley is stating in no uncertain terms at the top of this document. And then he goes on to list the universal rights of mankind. Man has the right to live by his own law. Capital L, law, meaning live according to natural law. It doesn't mean do whatever you want and just invent whatever law you want to invent. It means ultimately you have a right to live in harmony with natural law. Has a right, capital R, meaning what is a right, what is not a right. Understand the difference between those things and then choose the right over the wrong. Now you have a right to live in harmony with that law, that higher case cosmic L, the higher case L cosmic law that is always in effect and we are always bound by. To live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, capital W, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. All right, so we have the right to live by our own law, work in the way we will, live in the way we will, work, play, rest, and die as we will. Because we own ourselves. We are the stewards of our physical bodies while our consciousness is in incarnation in them. This is our property. We have a right to do it as we want so long as we are not hurting anybody else. And the qualifying statement for that is the first part of it. Man has the right to live by his own law, capital LW, okay, which is all about living in harmony with natural law. Man has the right to eat what he will, drink what he will, dwell where he will, move as he will on the face of the earth is the second part. So, you know, people don't have a right to tell you that you can't go here. I'm going to restrict your travel. I'm going to tell you where you can and can't live. I'm going to tell you what you can and can't put into your body. That's not someone else's rights. If you own your body, you can do with it as you will. Again, provided you're not harming someone else and their rights. So to make a claim on someone else's body and tell them you'll eat what we say and not eat what we say, you'll put this substance into your body, you won't put this substance into your body, you'll get permission from us before you can travel. This is all utter nonsense. This is all a total control freak's ideology on rights that don't exist. Those rights don't exist. We have a right to live in the way that we will to live as long as we are living under natural law and not trying to hurt anybody else in the process. And no one should tell us what we can, anybody trying to tell us what we can do with our body in that capacity is making a claim of ownership on the body, and that's called slavery. So the third paragraph, man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. These are all freedoms of expression. The freedom of what we will think, speak, write, create as far as aesthetic creations that we bring into existence, and how we'll dress ourselves and present ourselves. This is all man's rights. This is what we have a right to do, and that no one has a right to stop us from doing these things. No one has a right to say, you don't have a right to speak here. We're going to shut down free speech. We're going to tell you you're unlawfully assembled when it's your inherent right to assemble and speak. As was done right here in my state back a couple of years ago during the G20. They shut down the city of Pittsburgh and turned it into a total police state right in the state of Pennsylvania and told people, you're not free to speak. You're our slaves, and we're telling you that we'll tell you when and where you have a right to speak. That's what happened right in this state, and people don't even know about it.
Using sonic weaponry against protesters, sonic weaponry, giant shields, giant radar dishes on top of tanks or armored vehicles to thwart their own people who pay the bills of the men who were doing that.
That's right.
Sick.
Now, before we continue on, I want you to notice up at the top the symbol of Liberas, another symbol of Thelema, the septagram, the seven-pointed star, has 666 at the bottom, which is the state we need to transcend. And then there's the cosmic egg cracking open, and the symbol of the sun, or Horus, is coming out of the egg. That's higher consciousness. That's enlightenment. That's the man in unity consciousness, it is the representation of the concept of the aeon of Horus. So when people say, oh, it says 666 in there, no, you don't understand what he's saying. He's saying we're coming out of the 666 and raising ourselves to an understanding of what the true laws of the cosmos are, so that we can understand truly what our rights are and how they're being thwarted, and start coming out of that condition. And that's the dawning of the sun. And that symbol, the dot with the circle around it, is the symbol of the sun and the symbol of Horus, which is why he called the new aeon the aeon of Horus, the rising sun. It's about the savior of the world, which is true enlightenment and the true will coming back into humanity so humanity can save itself. Not about waiting for some externalized deity to come and rescue us from our own idiocy. That's not what this is about. This is about getting in touch with that higher will of creation and raising ourselves out of this sick condition that we're trapped in right now. Get out. Get out. The fourth paragraph, man has the right to love as he will. And then a quote from Liber al Vel Legis, take your fill and will of love as you will, when, where, and with whom you will. Capital W will. Doesn't mean go out and, rape somebody or sexually associate with them when they don't want that. It means do the will and express love. That's what this is all ultimately about. Express higher consciousness. Put that out there for people into the world. Take your fill of will and love. Capital L, love. All right? And then the big controversial part. In addition to the first part, there is no God but man, meaning there's no lowercase g God, creator of our experience, except us acting through our own free will and our own behavior. The fifth paragraph, or the fifth part of Liber Oz is, quote, man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. And here we go. Now everybody goes up into an uproar. Oh, my God, how can you say that? How could you agree with that? There's a right to kill? Well, notice it doesn't say there is a right to murder. And this is a big part of misunderstanding within even religious doctrine. Okay? If you look at the fifth commandment of the biblical texts in the Old Testament, the word for thou shalt not murder, the actual Hebrew original words for the commandment, the fifth commandment, is lo tirzak. Lo tirzak. Okay, that's lamed alpha, okay, is low. That means that's a prescription against doing something, or that's the thou shalt not part. And then the word tirzak is tav resh zadi hey, okay? And this word in Hebrew means to murder, not to kill, to murder, to take life that you had no justifiable reason for taking. You took it in aggression, not defense. See, killing in defense is something that is an inherent right. We may need to use that right if an attacker, an aggressor, will not desist from their attack on our rights and aggressing upon our right to remain well. Then you have a right. You already have that right to put down that aggressive attack by any amount of force required to put it down, up to and including lethal force. I've been talking about this on my show over the last several weeks, trying to get people a better understanding of this. And people are so made into timid, domesticated creatures because they won't stand up for their rights. They won't understand that you already have an inherent right to stand up for yourself and use defensive force if someone else is thwarting your rights, taking something that is not theirs to take, your rights that are a birthright given to you as a gift by the creator of the universe. Rights do not come from man. They cannot be taken away by man. They are a gift and a birthright from the creator, and no one has the right to thwart other people's rights. That doesn't exist. That's called wrongdoing. And you have a right to stop someone when they're engaged in such wrongdoing. And that's what Crowley is saying here. And he was saying this is the sacred masculine principle. All of the other things he's talking about is the non-aggression principle. You have the right to do this according to the higher law, according to natural law, not to break natural law and go against other people's natural inherent rights. You have a right to express all of your rights as long as they are within the natural law. When he's talking about this fifth part of it, this is the masculine aspect of it. The first four parts are the non-aggression principle. The fifth part is the masculine principle, which is the principle of self-defense. And he's saying you have the right to kill. He's not saying murder. In the it would not be translated if you went into the Hebrew as tirzak, which means to murder. The fifth commandment should not be stated as thou shalt not kill. That's incorrect. That's an incorrect translation. The fifth commandment is thou shalt not murder or take life in a means that you had absolutely no right to do so through aggression. That's called murder. In a defensive capacity, the right to kill exists when someone will not back down from their aggression and their usurpation of your inherent rights. Okay, so that's why people need to stand up and realize they're coming to try to take that right away from people. That this is happening now, as we speak, for people who are asleep and not paying attention or who think this isn't super important. You let them take your last line of defense. Go and look up what happened in Chile, Cambodia, the Soviet Union, to the Armenians in World War I, to the North Koreans now. That's what their model for the world is, North Korea. You want to see what the model for the New World Order is? Go look up the documentary on YouTube called Inside North Korea. And that's what's coming to the United States if we're not careful. You want to see what we need to do, the 23 skidoo, to make sure it doesn't happen, to get out while the getting is good? Go take a look at that documentary and you'll find out. Because that's the model for this world order that they're trying to bring in, this agenda. And they're going to try to bring it to the United States, and the first plan is to take away the American people's firearms because people don't understand the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. So that's what Crowley is stating in no uncertain terms here, and I am in 100% agreement with everything that is stated in this document. He ends the document by saying, the slaves shall serve. If your mindset is in the cage, and you have the mindset of a slave, you will be made to serve the archons of this universe. You won't step up and stand up for your rights and stand up for what is right. You're going to be turned into a slave. And that's just the truth of what's going on and what happens in this world when you don't want to understand cosmic law. You don't want to understand higher level spiritual law from the perspective of the non-aggression principle, the sacred feminine principles, in conjunction with the sacred masculine principles, that no one has a right to take your inherent rights and you have the right to stand up and defend them when that usurpation is taking place. Both of those principles need to be understood and integrated. He finally ends, of course, with the phrase, love is the law. Capital L, love, is the capital L law. Love under will, meaning any aspect of our true will needs to be built firmly upon a foundation of higher consciousness. And that's how he ends the document. And I've said it to people in my private life, and I'll say it here on the air again for the first time. If people understood this document fully, in its totality, that's really all anyone really truly needs to understand. I consider this document one of the highest spiritual teachings ever penned by the hand of man. And I guess I would really kind of like to wrap it up on that note and just give people my I'll read one more quote by Crowley, which I gave as the last slide. He said, the absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of each individual will, capital W, will. The absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of each individual will. And what he means by that is freedom is directly proportional to doing the true will of creation. Slavery is directly non-proportional. It's inversely proportional to doing the true will of creation. There will be less slavery as we do the true will. There will be more freedom as we do the true will. As we don't do the true will, there will be less freedom and more slavery. That's how the totality of the laws, the spiritual laws inherent to this universe operate. And people need to understand that. They need to get that through their thick skulls, and they need to get out of the head cage that they're in, as Crowley warned us. Get out. Get out. If he was here right now, I'm telling you, he would have 2 words. You would turn the microphone over to him, and he would say 2 words to the whole listening audience and everyone throughout the world. He would say, get out. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Bob, I want to thank you for having me come on and be able to present this material here today on Occult Empire.
Oh, it's mammoth. Yes, this document that you've just been reading from Crowley's own Liber Oz, a very short treatise to be sure, but like you said, packed full of truth. And like you said at the bottom, listed 1 through 5, the quintessential statement at the bottom, number 5, was man, capital M, has the right, capital R, to kill, lowercase k, those who would thwart these rights, capital R.
Right.
One has the right, inherent right, just by the reality that we were born into this universe. You have the right, ladies and gentlemen, to defend yourself from those who would take all of those rights that Mark enumerated off of Crowley's document. To work, to play, to rest, to live, to die, to drink, to dwell where I want, to move on the face of the earth where I want, not to be stopped by checkpoints or paperwork or thwarted to get on a vehicle to go where I do want to go. Man has the right to think what he wants, to speak right and be an artist of the things he wants to. And if any of these is thwarted by any being, you have the right to defend those other things that you want to do. If Crowley says here, if it could reach the ultimate penalty for those who would be so foolish as to impinge or to thwart your natural creator-given rights. It's so simple. And Mark, like you said, you spent the last year sharing this information. But and here we are. It's so powerful, Mark. Thank you. And sorry about the drop-off there.
No problem. I understand technical problems happen. I just want to say to the listening audience that I've said many, many times, and I will reiterate it one more time. Everything that I do, every single piece of work that I do is to attempt to stop the possibility of having to do this through physical force. No, I don't want to see that occur. But if it comes to that, that's where we'll have to go. Everything I'm doing is to try to help people to elevate their own consciousness so that it never has to come to that. I look at that as almost failure in a way. And, like I said, if our backs are up against the wall when it comes to something like that, then I personally will act on the side of self-defense. However, that's not what I want to see for humanity. I want to see us take the path of the dove instead of the path of the serpent. That's my wish for humanity, if we will only listen to the voice of wisdom. So, Bob, I'll end by just saying thank you so much for allowing me to come on the show and express, these ideas to the listening audience. And I will end by simply saying, love is the law, love under will.
Thank you, Mark. A wonderful exposition of the occult philosophy of Thelema and the writings of Aleister Crowley. Mark, can we count on you to